Holy hell, Cotton, what on earth is that? It's a deviant, Timmy. Well, I can tell it's up to no good, but what is it? No, not that. It's an unusual variation of a monster caused by specific circumstances. Oh. Well, thank gosh we don't have any of those in the new world. Of all the various monsters in the Monster Hunter series, the majority of them have reasonable lore backgrounds, ecology, and biology that backs up their abilities, and they tend to be believable creatures, at least in this universe. But where does this logic end? Where do monsters just start getting bonkers? Well, there are a couple of different answers. If you're looking for completely unique monsters, then look no further than black dragons. Today, however, we'll be looking at the crazy that starts with pre-existing creatures, meaning things like variants, deviants, or rare species. Yes, I will be taking your favorite monsters and turning them into something absolutely ridiculous. So without further ado, here are my top 5 variant, deviant, weirdo fusion monsters for Iceborne.
Number 5, Leshy Leshy.
What on earth does that mean? Okay, well, how about Leshen Survivor, Pooky Pooky? Now I know what it is, but that's a mouthful and a half. I'll give you a mouthful and a half if you keep complaining. What? A mouthful and a half of my fist? Remember back in the Witcher collaboration quest when we had the opportunity to save a Pooky Pooky from the grasp of the Leshen's branches? Well, what happens when Geralt doesn't do the side quest to rescue the Pooky, but still kills the Leshen? The answer is, the branches recede. However, unfortunately for the Pooky Pooky, it is too late for some of them to recede, and some of them simply remain lodged within his underbelly. Imagine a Pooky that is absolutely covered from head to wing to toe to tail in living, moving branches, almost like the shell of a Leshen surrounding the frame of a Pooky Pooky. For whatever reason, this monster has gained access to some of its attacker's power. The Pooky, obviously not being quite intelligent enough to unleash the full power of the Leshen's abilities, has simply worked out how to grow out the branches that got lodged within his underside, growing them all along his skin. This creates a natural form of regenerating armor that also adds a significant punch to any of Pooky's physical attacks, which you can expect to see significantly more of as the Leshen Survivor Pooky Pooky's poison sac was unfortunately irreparably damaged in the incident, meaning that this creature is purely physical. This picture here shows how it would look actually on the monster, while the original picture that I've had up shows exactly where the Pooky Pooky would get wood. Why would you say it that way? Still taking advantages of things like its long agile tongue and its semi-extendable tail, this Pooky would have had to completely relearn how to fight, which would add a number of new physical attacks to his arsenal. A few ideas would be something like a tailspin, but with the tail of course covered in branches and the tongue flinging out of the front side as well, which would create a full 360 degrees of danger around him. He would do a lot of head bashing and even use his wings as a weapon, actually swinging them at the hunter should the opportunity arise. The main loss for this Pooky is sadly that his underbelly is unbelievably weaker than any regular Pooky. While the branches give him significantly more protection everywhere else, the beginning point of these branches are still lodged within the Pooky, and they are still capable of damaging him internally. This Pooky is also incredibly weak to fire, as base Pooky is already relatively weak to fire, but adding the fact that he will be covered in wood sort of makes it hard for him to be anything but a 3-star fire weakness, which makes sense because he's a cool motherfucker.
Number 4, the Wulg Pack.
I tend to think of myself as a one-man wolf pack. But when my sister brought Doug home, I knew he was one of my own. And my wolf pack, it grew by one. So where there were two of us in the wolf pack. I was alone first in the pack, and then Doug joined in later.
Alright, so this one is a little unusual, but I think it has really high potential if it gets done right. The idea behind this is quite simply a pack of particularly large, strong, and cunning Wulgs. I still visualize them as being the same color scheme as regular Wulgs, though perhaps they would have a bit more unique patterning, which along with the increased size would help to differentiate them from their basic bitch counterparts. Well, they are sort of canine. As for the actual fight, that is where this could get very interesting. If you ever accidentally wound up in a fight with a Shamos in the Coral Highlands, and to a certain extent the regular Wulgs in the Hoarfrost Reach, what you'll notice is if you don't dispatch of your friend quickly, they'll call reinforcements, and if you are slow or unlucky enough, you could wind up fighting potentially 10 or even 20 at the exact same time. And one thing that is interesting to note when that happens is exactly how they fight. They don't all jump at you at once. In fact, they are actually super cautious and intelligent about it. They circle you and then attack one at a time. Now imagine a group of 3 or 4 Wulgs that are a touch smaller than Odogaron, except they fight like a single unit. unit and count as a single monster. Combos would revolve around one attacking from the side while another launches at you from the opposite direction simultaneously, creating 2 points of danger and creating interesting and unique situations to try and dodge. After all, how many fights ask you to regularly dodge in between two separate things that could kill you? And don't you dare forget about the grab that the Wulgs have, because the Wulg pack does the same thing, and from them it does a lot more damage, essentially functioning as a pin. The Wulgs are also smart enough that if a single hunter gets pinned, every other member of the pack would either assist in their murder or stand between the pinned hunter and the rest of their party to guard their catch. The other place I can see this fight being particularly unusual is with part breaks. Rather than counting the parts on each individual Wulg, I picture this fight more as each Wulg being a part of the monster, as the monster itself is the Wulg pack. If you focus down one specific Wulg, you can eventually kill it and remove it from the equation. Each Wulg would have signs of scarring and maybe rips in its fur or something to signify how damaged it is and allow you to track your specific target. And every time you kill a member of the Wulg pack, every remaining member enrages. The way this fight would be intended to be done would be to focus down the members one at a time, let the enrage cycles happen, but make the fight slowly easier and easier for yourself until you win. However, if done incorrectly, you could wind up with 4 Wulgs on 10% health, each chain enraging until the moment that they die, or you die, which you probably would.
Number 3. Lizard Skin Radobaan.
Okay, this one is probably the most ridiculous one on the list, but I also think it would be an incredible experience to actually fight it. So imagine Radobaan, but without the bones. He's essentially just a tar monster, right? Now take that tar monster, move its habitat to the lower Rotten Vale instead of the upper Rotten Vale, and essentially send him through the Great Juros Nest. When he comes out, if the stars align, you might wind up with a Jurobaan, a lizard skin Radobaan. A Radobaan who is essentially covered head to toe in living Juros. You may be thinking, how does that even make sense? Well, fuck you, that's how. But also, the Radobaan of course sleeps at night, at which point his currently attached Juros slowly manage to detach themselves and slink away, taking care of their basic needs, eating, sleeping, the other thing that we don't talk about because it's on the toilet. In the morning, the Radobaan grabs himself a whole new collection of Juros. Unfortunately for the Juros, that means an unlucky one could be grabbed multiple times, or in fact, every single day of his life.
Oh shit, here we go again.
This Radobaan is a little bit squishier than a normal one, as instead of bones, he's covered in extra creatures, with blunt weapons actually being particularly effective as they don't have to get through Juros to hit skin, they're blunt. The main danger and in fact biggest change of this fight happens if you come into contact physically with the Radobaan, as his skin is now covered in paralyzing lizards. If you accidentally walk into a part of him where the teeth of said Juros are poking out, you will be instantly paralyzed. His chin smacks would also come with Juros fangs sticking out of the bottom of it, meaning it too will pack a paralyzing punch. That is until the Juros falls off. Where this fight starts to take off is the Radobaan's use of the Juros as a weapon itself. For example, with the chin smack, if done a few times in a row, eventually it will knock the Juros off of his chin, exposing the chin and removing the paralysis part of that ability. The Radobaan would also have tail swing attacks that launch Juros at you from his tail, hunter attacks would slowly dislodge the lizards as well, and my favorite method of displacing Juros would be when the lizard skin Radobaan rolls. Spinning by, this Radobaan would start raining Juros in every which way, flying off of him at high speeds and at unpredictable angles. All of these do of course count as projectiles that you have to dodge. The final real mechanic here would be the depletion and regeneration of Radobaan's lizardman army, as eventually with all of this Juros flinging, the Radobaan must run out. There has to be a finite amount of Juros on top of him, attached to specific places, and as he uses them with certain attacks, he will run out of lizard-based gas in his tank. When this happens, he will go to his own with some Juros in it, and unleash his classic horizontal spin move, where he rolls around on the floor, except in here, this covers him in a beautiful and fresh coat of helpless Juros with which to fuck up your day.
Number 2. Stone Age Bazelgeuse.
So he uses primitive weapons? Well, sort of. What do you mean, sort of? I was about to tell you, Timmy. Oh, okay, go ahead then. One of the only inevitable forces in life is time itself, unstopping and unchanging, unyielding itself. Time will always progress at its own rate, and when we get older, our bodies change. Some of these changes can be helpful, but as you get older and older, you'll find that these changes are definitely not on your side. In the case of the Stone Age Bazelgeuse, once he reached a certain age, he started to have issues. Well, in the exploding scale-based bedroom. With a wrinkly, scrunchy face and a much grayer disposition and general body coloration, a bit longer fur in his furry areas, and completely dried up and gray scales which no longer explode. This, combined with the wisdom and training that comes with an advanced age, are what make the Stone Age Bazelgeuse a creature of his own. Once realizing that he no longer had any sort of explosive power, the entire attack strategy of the Bazelgeuse understandably went through a significant change. No longer being able to rely on his organic ordnance, he resorted to learning a much more physical attack style. But no, it's not just a bunch of charges and hip checks like any physical monster. The Stone Age Bazelgeuse is smart enough to be able to swing his body in a manner that shoots his dried up and hopeless little scales at you like rocks. Because now that they are all dried up and disarmed, that's essentially what these tiny gray scales are. They're rocks. When he does his little face cuddle, it would shoot scales up from the floor in a radius around his face. Same with smacking his tail straight down. It would do the same thing, but from his tail. The classic bombing run attack still exists, of course, but without the bombing part, this is a bit of a strange run, isn't it? Well, this is solved with a mix of precision and quantity. When the Stone Age Bazelgeuse takes to the sky, he doesn't fly in a straight line, slowly dropping packages. He does little spins, sort of like a helicopter, sending his scales out in wide arcs and patterns depending on the location of the hunters. The one big brand new attack that I would give this Stone Age Bazelgeuse is, so imagine if he put a bunch of his scales in his mouth and then just... Yeah, except it would be a little bit more controlled. But you try finding a good video of someone machine gun spitting seeds out of their mouth. It's hard, okay? Firing a line of them in a quick succession, this would be the secret surprise attack of the Stone Age Bazelgeuse, and would require some intense dodging action if you intend to avoid imminent death. When enraged, the Stone Age Bazelgeuse obviously can't pre-arm his scales, as they no longer arm in the first place, and instead, as comes with wisdom and experience, the Stone Age Bazelgeuse's enrage actually causes him to regenerate his scales at a significantly faster rate, allowing him to use his projectile attacks much more freely and allowing him to hurt you with them as much as possible, because I am a touch sadistic.
Number 1.
This is the monster that made me want to do any of this entire thing. More than anything because of his visuals. Imagine a Diablos born in the Hoarfrost Reach, but due to some sort of unforeseen mutation, he becomes so intertwined with the ice element that affects every stage of his growth, most prominently by changing the entire structure of what we expect from a Diablos' horns, as they are now completely made of an extremely thick crystalline ice substance. As an extension, the entire body of the Diablos becomes an extremely pale blue, reminiscent of ice itself, and the claws on the feet of the beast are notably longer, sharper, and have the capability to extend out downwards, protruding out of the bottom of the feet and essentially acting as nature's ice skates. Now, it would be a bit ludicrous to say that this Diablo suddenly gained something like an ice beam, but ice skates for feet is okay. They only happen sometimes, Timmy, okay? Oh, that fixes everything. But that doesn't mean that this beast doesn't have any elemental attacks. In fact, his elements hit very similar to Tigrex's, specifically his New World arm swipe that shoots up a sort of ice dust to give you ice blight. Now, before you diss the ice skate feet, let's talk about how they actually affect the fight, which put into one word is momentum. Due to the icy environment, this slight change in the biological makeup of Diablos is actually extremely useful for getting around. While he doesn't straight glide along the ice, obviously, this does allow his stride to not only be a little bit longer, but each step he takes while charging carries his momentum forward in between steps as well, because this effect would almost exclusively happen while charging, which would be this beast's main method of attack, which, while mundane on the surface, actually carries a lot of depth for this creature specifically. The charges would be slightly homing, reminiscent of the charge of Diablos, though significantly less accurate due to the gliding and momentum of the crystalline Diablos' charge. However, that doesn't necessarily mean you're safe, because this is where the combination of the crystal horns and the ice skates claws truly come into their own, as they allow this Diablos to combo his charges. Similar to Tigrex, who after a charge does a quick 180 to charge again, the crystalline Diablo sticks its horns in the ground at the end of a charge like an anchor, and uses its claws that are sort of like ice skates to arc around perfectly in a 180-degree spin, significantly faster and more elegant than a Tigrex ever could, and then come charging at you again. This move would simply replace the regular Diablos charge, which if you've ever fought a Diablos, you know is a pretty significant change already. But now imagine during that 180 spin, because the ice skates would be turning the Diablos in an arc, he shoots up a thin layer of the ice dust stuff we're talking about earlier from Tigrex's arm swipe, which would of course make ice blight happen to any one hit. Getting hit by this Diablos' horns would also cause ice blight, and attacks like his hip check would shoot up ice dust from his feet as well. What makes this fight completely unique from a regular Diablos, however, is that the crystalline Diablos does not dig. Even with its ridiculously sturdy and sharp horns, it cannot pierce the ice effectively enough to justify a fast burrowing attack. But what he can do is deflect off of walls. That's right, the charge isn't done changing just yet. If the crystalline Diablos hits a wall while charging, it will simply refract off of the wall at an almost perpendicular angle, redirecting the charge rather than stopping it completely as you would normally expect a wall to do. In summary then, no more annoying dig attack, most base physical attacks skip a little ice dust that causes ice blight, and the charge combos into itself, has a new gliding momentum to it, and also shoots out the ice dust when arcing in a turn. See, it may have sounded crazy to begin with, and maybe crazy is a word I would still use to describe it, but when I personally picture this creature and this fight, all I can think of is how much I would really just enjoy fighting this thing hundreds and hundreds of times. Alright everyone, these have been the Legend Survivor Pooky Pooky, the Wulg Pack, Lizard Skin Radobaan, Stone Age Bazelgeuse, and Crystalline Diablos, my strange variant deviant type creatures. Do you like any of these? What do you think would work for these kinds of monsters? Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the little notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or important news about the Kingdom Animalia. Rage, Continent, Hollow, we're all here, talking about the things you want to hear, so if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros, there's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.